A similar illustration of plodding industry in the same walk is presented in the career of George Kemp, the architect of the beautiful Scott Monument at Edinburgh. He was the son of a poor shepherd, who pursued his calling on the southern slope of the Pentland Hills. Amidst that pastoral solitude the boy had no opportunity of enjoying the contemplation of works of art. It happened, however, that in his 10th year he was sent on a message to Rosslyn, by the farmer for whom his father herded sheep, and the sight of the beautiful castle and chapel there seems to have made a vivid and enduring impression on his mind. Probably to enable him to indulge his love of architectural construction, the boy besought his father to let him be a joiner. And he was accordingly put apprentice to a neighboring village carpenter. Having served his time, he went to Galashiels to seek work. As he was plodding along the valley of the Tweed with his tools upon his back, a carriage overtook him near Elibank Tower. And the coachman, doubtless at the suggestion of his master, who was seated inside, having asked the youth how far he had to walk, and learning that he was on his way to Galashiels, invited him to mount the box beside him, and thus to ride thither. It turned out that the kindly gentleman inside was no other than Sir Walter Scott, then travelling on his official duty as Sheriff of Selkirkshire. Whilst working at Galashiels, Kemp had frequent opportunities of visiting Melrose, Dryburgh, and Jedburgh Bays, which he studied carefully. Inspired by his love of architecture, he worked his way as a carpenter over the greater part of the north of England, never omitting an opportunity of inspecting and making sketches of any fine Gothic building. On one occasion, when working in Lancashire, he walked 50 miles to York, spent a week in carefully examining the Minster, and returned in like manner on foot. We next find him in Glasgow, where he remained 4 years, studying the fine cathedral there during his spare time. He returned to England again, this time working his way further south, studying Canterbury, Winchester, Tintern, and other well-known structures. In 1824 he formed the design of travelling over Europe with the same object, supporting himself by his trade. Reaching Boulogne, he proceeded by Abbeville and Beauvais to Paris, spending a few weeks making drawings and studies at each place. His skill as a mechanic, and especially his knowledge of mill work, readily secured him employment wherever he went. And he usually chose the site of his employment in the neighborhood of some fine old Gothic structure, in studying which he occupied his leisure. After a year's working, travel, and study abroad, he returned to Scotland. He continued his studies, and became a proficient in drawing in perspective. Melrose was his favorite ruin, and he produced several elaborate drawings of the building, one of which, exhibiting it in a restored state, was afterwards engraved. He also obtained employment as a modeler of architectural designs, and made drawings for a work begun by an Edinburgh engraver, after the plan of Britain's cathedral antiquities. This was a task congenial to his tastes, and he labored at it with an enthusiasm which ensured its rapid advance. Walking on foot for the purpose over half Scotland, and living as an ordinary mechanic, whilst executing drawings which would have done credit to the best masters in the art. The projector of the work having died suddenly, the publication was however stopped, and Kemp sought other employment. Few knew of the genius of this man, for he was exceedingly taciturn and habitually modest, when the committee of the Scott Monument offered a prize for the best design. The competitors were numerous, including some of the greatest names in classical architecture. But the design unanimously selected was that of George Kemp, who was working at Kilwinning Abbey in Ayrshire, many miles off, when the letter reached him intimating the decision of the committee. Poor Kemp! Shortly after this event he met an untimely death, and did not live to see the first result of his indefatigable industry and self-culture embodied in stone, one of the most beautiful and appropriate memorials ever erected to literary genius. John Gibson was another artist full of a genuine enthusiasm and love for his art, which placed him high above those sordid temptations which urge meaner natures to make time the measure of profit. He was born at Giefn, near Conway, in North Wales, the son of a gardener. He early showed indications of his talent by the carvings in wood which he made by means of a common pocket knife. And his father, noting the direction of his talent, sent him to Liverpool and bound him apprentice to a cabinet maker and wood carver. He rapidly improved at his trade, and some of his carvings were much admired. He was thus naturally led to sculpture, and when 18 years old he modeled a small figure of Time in wax, which attracted considerable notice. The Messrs. Francis, sculptors, of Liverpool, having purchased the boy's indentures, took him as their apprentice for 6 years, during which his genius displayed itself in many original works. From thence he proceeded to London, and afterwards to Rome. And his fame became European. Robert Thorburn, the Royal Academician, like John Gibson, was born of poor parents. His father was a shoemaker at Dumfries. Besides Robert there were 2 other sons, one of whom is a skillful carver in wood. One day a lady called at the shoemaker's and found Robert, then a mere boy, engaged in drawing upon a stool which served him for a table. She examined his work, and observing his abilities, interested herself in obtaining for him some employment in drawing, and enlisted in his behalf the services of others who could assist him in prosecuting the study of art. The boy was diligent, painstaking, staid, and silent, mixing little with his companions, and forming but few intimacies. About the year 1830, some gentlemen of the town provided him with the means of proceeding to Edinburgh, where he was admitted as student at the Scottish Academy. There he had the advantage of studying under competent masters, and the progress which he made was rapid. From Edinburgh he removed to London, where, we understand, he had the advantage of being introduced to notice under the patronage of the Duke of Buccleuch. We need scarcely say, however, that of whatever use patronage may have been to Thorburn in giving him an introduction to the best circles, patronage of no kind could have made him the great artist that he unquestionably is, without native genius and diligent application. Noel Paton, the well-known painter, began his artistic career at Dunfermline and Paisley, as a drawer of patterns for tablecloths and muslin embroidered by hand. Meanwhile working diligently at higher subjects, including the drawing of the human figure. He was, like Turner, ready to turn his hand to any kind of work, and in 1840, when a mere youth, we find him engaged, among his other labors, in illustrating the Renfrewshire Annual. He worked his way step by step, slowly yet surely. But he remained unknown until the exhibition of the prize cartoons painted for the Houses of Parliament, when his picture of the Spirit of Religion, for which he obtained one of the first prizes, revealed him to the world as a genuine artist. And the works which he has since exhibited, such as the Reconciliation of Oberon and Titania, Home, and the Bluidi Tryst, have shown a steady advance in artistic power and culture.